気が。
And so, with Ruka's father defeated, we now enter into the final chapter of Fatal Frame 4, where we can finally enter into Soya's workshop and uncover the secrets he was hiding within. We also see the lingering effects of Luna Sedata still in Ruka's memory. It seems that, while she can remember the vigorous work her father poured into making his masks every night, she is still unable to recall her father's true face. But while we can't connect those memories just yet, we can hopefully uncover some new information with all the items in the room here, though first thing first, we do need to get this Hazuki doll hidden underneath the table here. But to get to it, we do need to snap its picture from a very particular place. Can't seem to get it from here. Instead, we need to take notice of the small crack in the blinds here. And we can snap its picture from here. We are going to have to be especially observant to make sure and snap the pictures of the final few dolls in this last chapter here. But our first real item to pick up is some more information on the mask of the lunar eclipse. Seems that this might have been some information that Soya had gotten regarding the previous mask maker's work from Soutsu. Seems that the work he put into making the mask was a little bit more intricate than we had previously found out. Seems that there is a hidden away shrine where he made the masks, and that, well, with the Dr. Aso's previous visit and usage of the camera obscura, that there was some additional information that was uncovered by a picture that the doctor had taken. And it was that picture that allowed Soya to continue his work newly on the the mask of the lunar eclipse. Because most of that information had been previously lost with Soutsu, wherever he might have ended up. Along with that information, accompanying this mask here, we do find a quickly scrawled out message from Ruka's father, where it seems that he has found the afterlife, and that it is connected to the fully eclipsed moon. It just so happens that we are almost in that phase of the moon, from what I could tell. But along with that reading material, there are a few expendable items, such as a stone mirror that we don't really have a use for right now. And at Soya's workstation here, you can find a few additional red crystals that I probably won't be having any use for. Which isn't to say I won't find a use for some upgrade items, such as these blue crystals. We still have a few additional stat upgrades to do for the camera. the last thing of interest for us in the workshop here is this very obvious altar in the corner of the room. On it we find more of Ruka's father's notes, where he laments and still ponders over what exactly went wrong with the ceremony of passage. Was it the problem with the handmaidens? Was it a problem with Sakuya? He's just not sure. But all he does know is that he did give birth to another day without suffering, and then he just looks forward to the inevitable end that's going to come for him. And with the slight breeze coming from behind the altar, we already know what that means. That's right, another hidden passage leading us further towards our destiny. Now, this passageway, as opposed to the other secreted away underground passageways, I think was only ever really used by the mask maker's lineage. Now it seems that on that date without suffering, Sakuya made her way down the passageway as well. And while I think some of the islanders assumed that they might be safe in the underground tunnels here, I don't think that Ruka's father had any illusions that he would be safe down here. Because in the end, it seemed like Sakuya knew exactly where she was going, or could very well be that whatever was using Sakuya's body after she had went to that coma instead knew exactly where it was going. But going from those man-made tunnels, we find ourselves inside of some natural-looking caverns, which makes me think that these tunnels might have connected with the passageways that the handmaidens were locked into during their cleansing process. But overall, we're not going to really run into any island or ghosts down here. I think this was, like I'd mentioned before, a place that only the mask makers ever really went. Also, nice little cache of blue crystals here, which does give us enough to at least do one more stat increase. And it's kind of a toss-up between capacity and absorb. Capacity would allow us to do more power lens shots, but absorb might be more useful in the long run, because that will just allow us to build up the power meter more for inevitably doing more power shots. But in this central chamber here, we are revisited by a familiar face in the form of the mask maker's apprentice. And there's a couple of things you want to keep in mind even this late in the game. Never underestimate your foe. I mean, even if you had primarily good luck fighting the mask maker or the mask maker's apprentice before in Ruka's house, if you let your guard down just a little bit and have him attack you at least twice, you're going to be almost dead. There's not really going to be a save point anytime soon, so unless you really want to backtrack all the way up to the workshop, yeah, you do want to be very careful down here. I mean, I've been pretty conservative with most of my healing items, and even then, I'm really not sitting on a whole lot of them. And almost at this point, yeah, we are kind of reaching a point of no return, or at least a point of no going further back. And as we head further down the tunnels here, we are given a little bit of a branching path, but don't let that fool you. It's not that complicated down here, though we do actually want to take this little branch off to the side here because there is a few optional things to get at the end of the path. The first of which some additional reading material from Sakuya. In it, he goes over his talks with Director Haibara, it might have been Yu Haibara, but it goes into the fact that, I guess, the Haibara's thought was that the soul is never really destroyed. It can be broken down into the smallest minute portion, but there's still some portion of it there. It's just that whatever's left is only pain and anguish and suffering. And it's that pain and anguish that is then collected inside of the masks, specifically the mask of the lunar eclipse. It's this, I guess, pinpoint little entryway into the afterlife that Sakuya hoped to tap into by making the masks. But inevitably, it seems more than likely that the living should never really try to go there, and that only pain and torment wait for you if you try to make that journey. Also, you might have already noticed it, but yeah, there is a Hazuki doll hidden away in the rubble here. Yeah, with those optional things out of the way, we just need to continue on forward down the path we were taking. Yeah, as that ghost description says, Sakuya was on her way to meet someone down here. And it does seem to be Ruka's father's final resting spot. Sitting quietly in front of this macabre-looking stalactite with faces encased upon it. This was more than likely where Suutsu might have reached his end, as well as Soya. It's here that we find a final note from Ruka's father, where in his final moments of contemplation in this quiet, dark place, he wondered more and more if there was indeed something wrong with the way he had made his mask, or instead it was a problem with the Utsu, or Sakuya herself, which caused the mask to break apart. The only thing he knows for certain is that Sakuya somehow managed to magnify the blooming even more, and that the next time the ceremony is performed, well, the blooming might happen to encompass places outside of the island. And it's a bit scary to think about a worldwide case of dementia leading to inevitable death and an endless cycle of living as an undead bloom ghoul. Makes you wonder exactly just what they hope to achieve down here with all these repeated masks and repeated rituals. Indeed, I think whether or not they kept the previous lunar masks down here, or maybe they used those masks as, I guess, templates along with the Utsuwa's face, it's a bit hard to tell. Whether you can chalk that up to the odd translations that we kind of run into here at the end of the game, or just the fact that a lot of the information was probably lost with Soutsu and the previous mask maker's lineage. All we know for certain is that we are still being pushed further and further down a path towards what seems like a very dark, inevitable end. But as Sakuya continues making her fated journey wherever she might be heading, we do want to make a quick stop in this particular cavern because we can find some additional upgrade items. But there's also some very easy to miss reading material on the opposing wall here. There's nothing really to bring your attention to it. And overall, it doesn't really seem to give us any additional information regarding the Day Without Suffering. Just the fact that if the Utsuwa manages to not wake up following the passage of coming, that she will inevitably wake up and cause a resonant blooming throughout the island. And that all those people that are touched will need to have their faces cut off. Yet again, just a lot of information I think we've already been able to piece together so far in the game, which is why I think they kind of made that optional. Here on the beach, it seems almost serene. Until you start to uncover the ghastly final images of some of the islanders trying to make a last-ditch effort to get away from the island. I think something that's important to remember is that, even being able to swim, if you're isolated on an island in the middle of the ocean, swimming is not always going to be a way to escape. And in the case of the story, even if people weren't hoping to swim to safety, rather they hoped to drown instead of getting bloomed, seems that most of them were not able to escape that fated meeting with Sakuya. But outside of that, couple of vanishing ghost images, we do find a few upgradable items here. More importantly than that, this is our passageway to the final area. Yeah, I think we've had some mentions previously of the Lighthouse and a few pictures and portraits around the Rogutsu Center. Though before we head there, there is a doll playing some beach blanket bingo amongst the rocks. Yeah, otherwise, up to this point, we haven't really seen the lighthouse, though I do like the symbolism and, I guess, thought behind having to head to this lighthouse. It's the closest place to the moon, the passageway to the afterlife, and it's also just a very atmospheric setting that I think we've seen previously in games like Nanashi no Game. Sadly, before we can continue following Sakuya up into the lighthouse, we have another rather troublesome ghost to deal with in the form of the secondary Utsuwa that was being used in the Kagura dance above ground. I think this is actually a nurse that had been working at the facility, and we had, I think, gotten some of her diary entries on that very long path leading to some gravestones. Her name was like Tachibana Tano or something like that. In the end, though, she's not that difficult to fight. She just has more or less a swooping attack, and I don't even think she really does the dance move she had done previously when you were fighting the handmaidens. Really, what kind of works against you most here is a very narrow passageway. I mean, since her attack is a bit of a long-range swooping grab, she can very easily be inside of the wall. As you see there, definitely not laughable damage to deal with. Especially if you manage to have a pretty bad run-in with the Mask Maker's Apprentice. Looks like she does still have her, I guess, dancing taunt. Seems a little bit less useful considering that you're not being distracted by the handmaidens as well as her. Still, it does allow you easy access to possibly getting off a fully charged shot, which doesn't do a lot of damage in this circumstance, but every little bit helps. I'd say also using your power lens might help, but it also might trigger her to go into her bloom state, which doesn't really make this fight any more difficult, but it does allow me a little bit of a venting point in the case of if you were actually trying to get 100% of the ghost list in this game. As I mentioned before, getting the full ghost list means you have to make sure and kill every enemy ghost in its bloom state, and unless you're playing on the harder difficulties, they will more than likely never enter that state, and there's honestly no real way to force them into that state. So yeah, getting 100% of the ghost list, well, for one thing, is apparently bugged from what I can tell. Just some of the ghosts will never bloom. And even if they did have the opportunity to bloom, you would still have to deal with some circumstances where you might only fight certain ghosts maybe 2 times in the game. So it just ends up being a very, very annoying hurdle to get over. I'm not sure why they added that additional hurdle along with, just collecting all the vanishing ghosts. But speaking of hurdles, we are now inside the Lighthouse, which has a number of hurdles in itself to deal with. The first of which is the fact that, well, it's a lighthouse, so it's very tall, which means that we are in for a very, very long journey ahead of us.
Sakuyaの顔そのものが月はみの面なのだ。すべての人々が咲くことになる。
Second hurdle comes in the form of Ruka's father, where while we have fought him previously and he wasn't that difficult to deal with, the lighthouse here still isn't the best environment to fight him in. Especially considering that he has plenty of spots to just pop inside of Geo and pop off his little annoying projectile. Still, in the end, the real danger is if you get caught by his throw, which I think realistically does about half your health and damage. Still, before I headed in here, figured since we are so close to the end of the game, and I have collected quite a small storehouse of upgraded film, it might be worth indulging in using some of that upgraded film just to make some of these in-game fights a little bit easier. Though, I mean, even with the increased damage, it's still kind of troublesome sometimes to get really fully charged shots off on Ruka's father. But, as he is taken care of, you find some documentation from Soutsu, And he goes a little bit more into some warnings regarding the mask of the lunar eclipse. Namely the fact that you really don't want to let the Utsuwa resonate or bloom further because, yeah, she apparently will cause everyone on the island to bloom in accordance, and, you know, we already kind of knew that. And honestly, and in retrospect, I feel they kind of missed an opportunity here. Instead of trying to use Ruka's father again, they could have made some variant of him so that, you know, maybe we could fight Soutsu, and I don't know. There might have been something more there, but instead they just decided to have you fight Ruka's father a couple more times. Because a little bit of a spoiler alert, that is not going to be our final run-in with him as we venture further and further up this extremely tall lighthouse here. I will say this is probably one of the spots in the game where I most appreciate the, you know, run button that they put in, or at least the increased running speed. Because there's not that much to this lighthouse for the most part. I mean, they do give you the option of the door there, but it is locked because our inevitable destination is going to be all the way up at the top. And while there are a few sets of broken stairways, I mean, it's pretty much just a straight shot up, even though there are a few different staircases. It's now time for round 2 with Sakuya. This is where things become even more difficult and arguably more tedious. As we have now eliminated even more fighting space to deal with him in, he now starts to favor more and more just teleporting into the center pillar there. He will start to fire off those little homing masks that, while they don't do a lot of damage, they just are very annoying to deal with, as unless you do damage to him, they will never dissipate until they hit you. I suppose the one saving grace with this particular enemy encounter is just the fact that his grab is not one he seems to connect with that often. It's probably for the best, considering I would probably be dead by this point if he had managed to connect with most of them. If you find that you cannot interrupt that mask, I fully recommend just eating the hit as quickly as you possibly can, just so it doesn't end up interrupting any of your future attacks or attempts at attacks against her father here. It's nothing worse than trying to start a fatal frame combo and getting knocked out of that by a very small portion of damage. Here, we are yet again given a number of stairways we can go, and in fact you can head back down this staircase here, and there is a small cache of blue crystals to pick up, but at this point we are pretty much set and we don't really need to worry about doing that. Also, you might see a ghost indicator there. We aren't able to get to it just yet. And we need to deal with one final run-in with Sakuya here. Yeah, again, nothing really new to talk about with this fight. Wish I could give some better pointers about how to deal with him. But it's more or less just the luck of the draw where he decides to teleport in. I guess as long as you are making sure to make use of your upgraded film and using those power shots, it can go a little bit quicker. Right now with this upgraded film and our fully powered up Zero lens, one shot from that deals almost the same amount of damage as a 3-shot Fatal Frame combo, which, you know, has already taken away about 80% of his life. Yeah, I can only imagine how tedious it must be, though, if you are trying to get his bloom shot to redo these fights in this lighthouse just over and over again. For finally defeating him, we do manage to get one final note from his ghost. And in it, he realizes that he has just been continuing a very vicious cycle of continuing these rituals by following Inso Utsu's, footsteps. And he also comes to realize that, well, the mask he had been making was not the real mask of the lunar eclipse. Instead, that is the bloom visage that is on Sakuya or every previous Utsuwa's face. He only hopes that the new mask he made might be used to maybe put a stop to the ritual, but there's just one final thing he was missing, some means to hopefully calm the Utsuwa's spirit. Indeed, in Ruka's attempts to try to, remember everything that she has forgotten, she has been seemingly redoing all the different steps of the ceremony of passage, the Kagura, and inevitably the day without suffering. She's just been reliving all those events over and over again that the island has been stuck inside of. Only hope that we can figure out just some means of calming the spirit, since we have now the final piece, I think, of the puzzle with the mask of the lunar eclipse. Though, before we head to the top, we can snap a quick little hidden ghost here of some very unique shrine maidens that I think were from the family that Ruka and her mother were originally from. Yeah, I think we are given quite a few names over the course of the game. There's the family that the mask makers were a part of, Ruka's family, the Haibaras. And it's really good to try your best to keep track of all those names. Also, we can't directly follow the path the shrine maidens were taking. Take a quick little snapshot of, I think, our third to last doll in the game. Yeah, it's only become just kind of evident right now that as we've been heading further and further up the lighthouse, that this strange song going on in the background has kind of layered more and more and become even more discordant. there is a very good reason for that. And that's because we are almost to the very top of the lighthouse. I think Sakuya is waiting for us. Along with Sakuya, we also find Sayaka, Ruka's mother, also waiting for us. And it's as if the game is telling us to not worry about these expendable items anymore. We need to finish up this story. Ruka's mother has left behind for us is, I think, the last piece of the puzzle that we've kind of been given hints at throughout the game, which is that the lineage that Ruka and her mother came from guarded a special song that manages to quell the very troubled spirit of, I think, the Utsuwa. I think that was the missing piece of the puzzle Soyu was missing in trying to figure out how to stop the blooming in the day without suffering. Still, we don't want to hurry and follow Sakuya just yet. There is something that's pretty easy to miss with all the background music going on, and that's the fact that there is a Hazuki doll waiting for us out here. Nestled right under the railing. Even with the chime function, background music kind of drowns out any indication, at least auditory-wise, that the doll is down here. Yeah, it is now time for our final encounter of the game. But as this is the final encounter of the game, I figured, we might as well go at least a little bit overpowered here and, use our second strongest type of film. Because as with most Fatal Frame games, the last boss can be a bit troublesome. Well, Sakuya here fights exactly how she has previously, and might have gone a little bit overboard. Though with Sakuya defeated, we are now bathed in the silence and the moonlight. We're just presented with this organ here at the top of the lighthouse, though before we interact with that, there's one tricky last curveball that the game decides to throw at you in case you are trying to do collectibles. Yeah, this is the final Hazuki doll in the game. And one that I think is very easy to miss. I mean, unless you are actually going out of your way to look at the very nicely subtle view of the rest of the island from up atop the lighthouse here. But yeah, the reason that that particular boss fight seemed so underwhelming was because it is actually a multi-part boss fight. The second half involves this very ornate organ here.
ルカ、月森の歌を。
It's here that Ruka is able to string together the information that her father and mother both gave to her. And she is able to put together the full Tsukimura song to hopefully quell the very tortured spirit of Sakuya. And indeed, it's been the song that we have been slowly learning over the course of the game. Though there is a little bit of a caveat here. And that's the fact that if we don't play this song correctly, if we are off by even one note, we will have to fight Sakuya over and over again. so, able to close the door on the day without suffering, hopefully bringing an end to the seemingly endless cycle of suffering and pain that went on at Ragutsu Island. So, some final thoughts about, first the ending. Meh. Was a bit lackluster. I mean, it looks like they were maybe trying to pull on some emotional heartstrings by Ruka, wanting to spend more time with her father, or the newly uncovered memories of her father, but he always kind of came across as kind of an asshole in the game, and didn't really ever have any kind of setup or more connection on that end. Especially when you consider the way they set up, like, the connection in 1 between brother and sister, the closeness there, or 2, trying to protect your twin, and the cycle of pain that happened with that, and the town and that ritual, or 3, which was kind of collecting all of 1 and 2, and it did an additional plot line of, oh, my lover died and I gotta escort him to the afterlife. This was, I don't know, it felt somehow more bloated with additional plot lines and characters, kind of like it was trying to mimic what they did in 3 by having multiple, character storylines, but a lot of it was just retreaded information that we didn't really need to know, 3 times over. And yeah, like I said, the ending was just kind of wet fart. Just kind of saw, the plug pulled from the butthole of the afterlife that was Sakuya, and all the souls that were trapped on the island via her trapped spirit, were let free, which was cool, I guess. But, we already kind of did a better visual effect for the afterlife and water and Fatal Frame 3, and I get the impression that Fatal Frame 5 probably does a bit of a better job with water in the afterlife in comparison to anything. But still, I will say that it's a fun game. It requires a lot of grinding if you want to 100% it, but it's an enjoyable game that sadly most people won't have a chance to play because Tecmo decided to leave it a buggy mess that Nintendo just didn't want to release outside of Japan. So, well, hopefully you did enjoy the LP. Hopefully you will join me next time for whatever I decide to play, and maybe if it ever strikes me in the future, hopefully finish up the Fatal Frame series by doing Fatal Frame 5. But hopefully you enjoyed this romp into camera-based horror, and I will see you next time.